That's true. We talked about paints earlier.
Yeah, Tamiya's, Alclads, lacquers on lacquers.
We did.
Brushing things, air versus airbrushing.
Right.
What else? The way testers would rip up.
Oh, yeah, I used to use tester paints at the same time he was using them. I don't know if he's still using them or not, but I had a problem with adhesion. Adhesion. That's the right word. You spray the paint down, put some tape down, spray another layer, a different color down, pull the tape up, you get jaggedy edges on the paint line, and the underlying layer would pull up with the tape. No matter what I would do, that would happen. I put primer down, it would still happen. So I just quit using tester paints.
Yeah.
And you were having the same problems at the same time.
Yeah, that's back when I was starting my own YouTube channel, and I was going for testers simply because of the affordability of it compared to any of the others.
Oh, it's cheaper, and it's more readily available.
And it shows why it's so much cheaper.
Yeah.
But once I started on the Jupiter here, that was all ModelMaster, so I started investing in that, and I haven't needed to buy any different paints because I'm still stuck on this model.
Right.
But when I do, I'll probably go Tamiya's, more ModelMasters, because that's been pretty reliable so far.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Tom some questions. I want to see if he knows something.
Oh, yeah, let's see.
Okay, this is about paint. What is the difference? I mean, what can you do with paints? Like, what I mean is lacquer versus enamel versus acrylic. Can you mix those paints?
I would say no. Simply because of the base that they're worked on, acrylic being water compared to oil, compared to lacquer. None of those are going to play
well, you
nice.
can't mix them together in color.
Like on top of each other,
yeah,
I see.
Yeah, on top of each other. You can't mix the paints, no. I can't take a lacquer and mix it with an acrylic. You're going to get a gooey mess. You're just going to get a gooey mess. Now, lacquers and enamels might mix.
Yeah. There's one that's the
but
other.
I wouldn't try it.
It's either lacquers on enamels or enamels on lacquers.
You know,
that's safe.
I have done both ways. The trick is to let the paint to cure fully. Now, the problem is enamel paints can take 2 weeks to cure. Whereas a lacquer, an hour.
Yeah, yeah.
So, when you do the enamel paint, you've got to let that thing sit a week before you put in the lacquer over the top.
I think that was it. Just the lacquer is so much hotter than the enamel.
It'll eat into it if it's not cured. But once it's cured, it's got like a hard shell, and it's harder to damage that enamel.
But like when I was doing that Alclad paint chip thing I showed you, that's all black gloss enamel that I put the Alclads on, so I didn't have any problems with
and the Alclads are lacquer. They're hardcore lacquer too. They're not the minor lacquer.
Yeah.
Like Tamiya paint's kind of lacquer, kind of not.
But even then, if you're working with different enamels like a Krylon and a Rust-Oleum, those can fight each other, and even though they're enamels.
Right.
So
and
it comes down to formulations.
Those paints I won't use anymore for hobby.
Yeah.
I used to. I quit. And I quit because I got weird interactions with hobby paints. Like, yeah, let me put down this white primer from Rust-Oleum, and then I'll put Tamiya gloss red paint over the top, and it bubbles.
Oof.
And you're making a car model, you don't want that bubbling. Then I put a Tamiya primer down, and then I put Tamiya gloss over it, no bubbles.
I had figured like a company like Tamiya would make their own primer just to make the money and say, okay, yeah, it does work with our stuff, but in this case,
it does work
really
with their stuff, yes.
And you can't guarantee results from someone else.
That's why you should always test it. I've got a set of sheet styrene. Old for sale signs and stuff. I went to a garage sale and a lady had a big box of for sale signs saying free. I took them all because they're styrene.
Yeah.
And they're great for doing demo paint on. So I'll paint some colors down that I want to use and see if they interact.
That's a good idea.
So I usually, not always, experiment before I do when I haven't done it before. And even then, it doesn't guarantee anything. I had some really freaky results recently, and I don't remember what it was, that just didn't match what my past experience was. I think I was spraying an all-clad paint over something, and it just went bad. And I had done that exact same thing before in the past. So even if you stick with just pure all-clad paints, you can't guarantee it's going to go good. Now, I know for a fact all-clad chrome is tricky. And you can't spray a lacquer paint over it.
Okay.
It just takes a gloss finish right off. But other than that, I think you can pretty much spray any kind of paint on any kind as long as it's fully cured.
Probably, yeah. Acrylic may not be strong enough to support things if you put it on that.
Well,
because it is a it is a plastic too.
It is a plastic, and the thing about acrylic is, this is why I brought up the different types of paints. Because I've done this before. I'll spray down acrylic paint, and then I got some panel lines I want to fill in with the same color. So I'll use an enamel paint, because the enamel thinner won't touch the acrylic.
Oh.
So I can just wipe that off with some thinner, and then leave only the paint in the crevices.
Oh, that's a great idea.
So I've done that before. And the tester paints are really good about color matching between their different kinds. Their enamel and their acrylic are almost perfectly color matched.
Good.
That's good to know. So if you buy white acrylic and white enamel, they're the exact same color.
One of the reasons why I've stayed away from acrylics is that with, at least on the fine art side, they dry a tone lighter than they are wet. So when you, well, at least with fine art, if you put a particular red down and you're expecting that, and then it fades, you're like, what? Whereas oil paints, they go down wet, they stay that tone the entire time. So I've never gotten into acrylics on model kits because I would expect the same thing, but I don't know if that's true.
The Leho paints that are acrylic that I've used dry like a matte, and they peel up in big chunks.
Yeah.
They're tough when they dry. They're hard to scratch when they're dry. I did that on the Brocchieri Cruiser. And I don't like cleaning them out of airbrushes. That Tamiya paint, put some lacquer thinner in there, it's gone. It cleans right out of that airbrush.
Nice.
I'm not pulling the airbrush apart. I'm not getting a gummed up airbrush. But when I use Vallejo paint, and I don't use it much, there's people that swear by this stuff. Not me. I don't like it because it gums up the airbrush, and I got to tear the whole airbrush apart to clean it out. And it's not because I'm using lacquer thinner. I know when you put lacquer thinner with Vallejo paint, you get goo. You get this big gooey ball.
I've had that happen to me with different paints.
It just
not Vallejo, but
it immediately just it gels. Okay, and I made that mistake in the airbrush. Oh, bad.
Turns into a wad of gum
inside the airbrush.
New airbrush.
Oh, that was so fun to clean out. No, I cleaned it out.
Yeah,
I eventually got it clear.
I threw mine out when that happened.
But the Vallejos, they bond up really good. They're polymer chains, which is a long molecular chain. So it dries up very strong like a matte, but it dries like a matte. So if you want to do paint chipping or weathering, you can't really use it.
I see.
Okay? But an enamel paint isn't going to penetrate that. And I was using lacquer thinner on it, and it's not penetrating it. Now, 91% is alcohol. It starts with the I. Isopropyl. Isopropyl. I got you messed up. That stuff will eat through anything. It eats the lacquer, it eats the enamel, and it'll eat into Vallejo paints. So there's one thing to keep in mind.
And when you have done that, have you seen that you could use that to any particular aesthetic effect? Like putting isopropyl on there a certain way? Or,
I haven't. I wasn't looking for that.
Yeah.
Another thing I found that eats through almost any kind of paint is Arm & Hammer baking soda toothpaste, which surprised the heck out of me. I was experimenting. I want to do paint chipping. I was trying to learn how to do the hairspray effect, where you spray hairspray and then put paint over the top.
Yeah.
And I was brushing my teeth and not paying attention, set my toothbrush down on one of the sheets. Looked at it, went, oh, we'll just leave it and see what happens. Put some paint over it, came back, it had eaten through everything. Primer, all the way down to bare plastic. And it was only there a day.
No kidding.
Ate everything off.
Wow, I wonder if a bath of that would be good for stripping.
I have no idea. I never tried it beyond that. It left some really interesting paint effects on there. Because the edges of it, there were 4 or 5 different colored layers of paint on that. And it left the color paint rings.
So kind of
like you were showing me on your car.
Yeah, yeah. Huh.
Okay. So it did a good effect, but it stripped it bare plastic.
Like if you stop it beforehand, or
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was left on there overnight that did it or what did it.
Right.
Because I expected you'd paint over the toothpaste, you'd wipe the toothpaste off, and you'd have your underlying layer. Not that it would eat all the way down. Because I wanted to take the toothpaste and do this with it on the model.
Yeah.
Well, after I left it there, I was like, let's try this. Let's see if I can splatter it off the toothbrush like this on the model, paint it, and then wipe it off, and I get a nice weathered pattern. No. It's just going to eat all the way through.
Yeah, maybe if you stop it early, but then you'd have to experiment for how
You also
long
have to wait
leave
exactly, and I don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
That was going to be too much. Although I do that sometimes on my channel. I don't know if you've caught me doing that. I will set up 5 or 6 different cards and put 5 or 6 different paints on it.
I did see one of those a while ago, I think. Yeah.
I did that with Putties. Deslocks Cruiser. I went through 7 or 8 different putties, putting that model together, seeing which one I like to work with. Found out it was automotive putty that worked the best. Aves is good for putty, but it cures harder than the styrene.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to sand it, you sand styrene, not Aves.
Don't eat the fiber optics.
So you don't really want that happening. Eating the fiber optics or Aves is a putty. The good thing about Aves as a putty, though, is you can put water on it and just smooth it right flat.
Yeah.
Flush with the surface.
I do love working with the stuff.
It does work good. In fact, I loved it for a long time. But someone sold me on Bondo automotive putty, and it works better. It's lacquer based. If you got lacquer thinner laying around, I don't know if you can get that stuff in California. Steve Nee was complaining about that in one of his videos.
Yeah, it's kind of hit or miss here and there, and some shops will have it, some won't. Some have old stock, some have new formulations, and it's always changing up.
Right.
For a while, we couldn't get a Squadron putty because of
it had
whatever's
lacquer thinner in it.
Yeah.
It has lacquer thinner in it.
But they can sell Alclads in state, so
that's got lacquer thinner in it.
yeah. So it's could be anything. Maybe it's the tooling and,
or maybe that's general public and hardly anyone messes with alkali lacquer paints.
That's
so they
just
it's a specialty paint, so they ignore it.
Yeah.
Whereas in Texas, I can walk into a big box home improvement store and there's lacquer thinner on the shelf. Anyone can buy this stuff.
To me, it was putty we couldn't get for a while either. They had to reformulate.
California held up Tamiya paints for about a year.
Yeah.
Tamiya glue paints and everything because they didn't have the proper label on it.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yeah, that's what happened. And once they finally got the proper label on it, it came right back in.
Oh.
They didn't reformulate it.
Oh, okay. I heard a different story.
The spray can was fine because they had the proper label on the spray can, so you could get spray paint, but you couldn't get the bottle paint. I had a talk with more than one person about that one. And Scott with Elm City Hobbies finally, I think it was him, finally told me what was going on.
Hey, baby.
Are you videotaping?
It's okay.
Hi.
No,
Can
over
I
there.
have a drill? Oh, there.
Oh, my baby wants a drill.
Mine should be calling soon to come get me. Oh yeah, I probably should call her and just tell her to come get me real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Are they all done?
It's 6 o'clock. They've been at the beach for 3 hours.
Oh.
They forgot me.
They don't want to leave.
They're already in Anaheim.
Yeah, they forgot me. So I'm going to send her a text. That way it's not as intrusive as a phone call.
I'll be back in a second.
Okay. I'll just pause the video. That way I can actually talk to the wife.
And here are a few YouTube channels that might interest you. As always, the Scale Model Addict. Scott Gervan brings you his own work and the Scale Model Addict Forum and Scale Model Addict Magazine. Dr. Faust's The Painting Clinic. Check out Tony for miniatures and model painting. What time is it? It's Cranky time. With his lab rat Ori assistant Igor, Dr. Cranky brings you the best in rats, rods, and rust. Steve Neal's Garage with Rosie the Wonder Dog, Mary, and Xena, featuring feature film props, restorations, and scale model artistry. Scott Alexander of Atomic City Models, specializing in 2001: A Space Odyssey model recreations and a few other notable genre pieces as well. Braddock 001, whether a 1-to-1 scale Borg sleep station, droids of any make or model, or even popular superhero armor or any kind of sculpture, look to Brad Carpenter to bring it. And for the trials, tribulations, and tales of my car Red 2 and its droid lemons, check in on Gears McTinkersome. Bad Grendels for fine model work, timer chips, and electronics knowledge. The ModelManTom channel would like to thank the following for their sponsorship. Elliot Brown of Kingston Vacuum Works, featuring Fedoratron.com and WarmPlastic.com. Lighting for extraordinary modelers, and vacuum-forming tables for designers, modelers, and engineers. Kingston Vacuum Works covers it all. Paul at thefiberopticstore.com, now presenting the beta version of its new site, thefiberopticprojects.com. For an exceptional selection and great prices of fiber optics of all sizes and quantities, thefiberopticstore.com. Carpenter Creations. If you can dream it, you can make it. Braden Carpenter, science fiction artiste. From full-scale board cubicles or droid displays of all kinds, Carpenter Creations. Steve Neal's Garage, props and models for motion picture and discerning collectors, as well as prosthetic makeup and CG. Contact Steve through stevenealsgarage.com. Model reviews from Round 2 Models, AMT, MPC, Polar Lights, and Lindbergh. Scale Model Addict Magazine. Issue 3 now available. Issue number 4 is in the works. The Orbital Defense Engineering Commission, a 2001 A Space Odyssey specific forum for scale model kits, reviews, news, and discussion. Odec.proboards.com. More than just talk, hobbytalk.com, a forum for every hobby. And for the finest reference collection of feature film studio props and miniatures and models, it's Modelers, Miniatures, and Magic at modelermagic.com.